talk more about that. And joining us now is Michael Taylor. We've had him on talk about things like this recently. He's the Senior Managing Director of Travel, Hospitality, Retail, and Customer Service at J.D. Power. Michael, good to see you again. Thank you for coming in.
Nice to see you.
Okay, I want to first, before we go any further, our producer is from the wonderful country of Georgia, and I have to note that it has been recognized as the cradle of wine going back to the beginning of time. So talk about that, how important this is, the significance of World. I'm not going to hold your feet to the fire on that one. You may not know about that. But let's talk about World Tourism Day and this year's theme, what it means.
Well, I can certainly talk about wine all night, but we'll go back to tourism. For Georgia, it fits right in with the trend that we're seeing at J.D. Power for travel, which is people are looking for unusual destinations that aren't on the beaten path anymore. And this is really driven by YouTubers and Instagrammers who are looking for the next big thing or the next different thing so they can stand out from the crowd. And Georgia certainly is that.
Yeah.
It's not on a list of traditional destinations for tourism. So congratulations to them for getting this honor.
Yeah, let's expand a bit on that. What it really means is Georgia's role as this year's host, because it's a relatively tiny nation, and it's going to have a big spotlight. And people who do travel there talk about its natural beauty, the people from that region as well. So what's it mean to suddenly have the world's attention?
Well, I think what you mentioned some of the locations in Georgia at the top of this segment. And besides Tbilisi, I don't think most people in the Western world or even in the Eastern world would know anything beyond that. So some of the things that I've seen on websites for World Tourism Days that are concentrating on Georgia, some of this looks very fascinating. It reminds me of things that you would find in the Middle East. And that's unusual, in a country like Georgia, which has a great history, by the way, not only with wine, I'm sure, but also with the impact on Asia in general. So, again, it's just one of those things that we see it as a trend of people looking for unusual destinations and for something that's really, really different.
Okay, so let's talk about the state of global tourism. We know that it's rebounded. We've heard people talk about revenge travel since the pandemic. So how are things going?
Well, it is. I always start these conversations by saying it surprises even me that travel seems to be defying the laws of economics, which is prices are quite a bit higher than they were 2 or 3 years ago, but there has been no lack of demand for it. U.S. travelers are going to spend about $1 trillion this year. Chinese travelers, which would be in the number 2 spot, are going to spend about $750 billion. And they're growing, and Chinese travel is growing at 12%, which is an amazing figure. So probably by the next 5 or 6 years, it'll probably surpass the total travel budget of U.S. citizens. So there just seems to be no end in sight, but nothing good can last forever. However, it doesn't seem to be slacking anytime soon.
Okay, that's good caveat there. So what are this year's travel trends? Because you and I have talked about people don't want to hit the spots that are overly crowded right now. And you talked about kids wanting cool vacations. They don't want to go to beaches and broil. They want to see other things. So what kind of experiences are people pursuing? And, big question, how much are people spending?
Well, I'll start with the places where they're going. And one of the things that I think is very interesting is some of the sites that are being created by Middle Eastern countries, especially Saudi Arabia, which is creating spectacles in the desert that are extraordinarily artistic and just surreal, something out of a science fiction novel or science fiction movie. One of them is the developing city of Neom, which is going to be, as I understand it, 105 miles long and 650 feet wide, if you can imagine that.
Wow.
And they have various themes as you travel along this road through this, what is purported to be eventually in the future, a single city. And when you see pictures of what they've already created there, it just doesn't look real. It looks like something out of Star Wars or something. So the Saudi Arabians are creating these things that follow this trend that people want these unusual things and they're going, wow, what the heck is that? I've never seen that in my life. You can go to Portugal, you can go to London, you take pictures there, but that's been done millions and millions of times. What people want today is something that's really highly unusual.
Yeah, and let's talk about over-tourism, because you and I have talked about that as well. How many pictures have we seen from Machu Picchu and various places? And then also being a good tourist. You know, people carving their names, you know, in the Coliseum and things like that. You just can't do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. It's a shame that that actually happens. You know, one of the most egregious things, we talked about this on a previous segment on CGTN, which is when a cruise ship docks into a port, everyone wants to see the same 5 sites, and they go en masse to there and they get kind of mobbed. And we talked also about things that are happening in Spain where people are shooting tourists with squirt guns to kind of discourage them from visiting Barcelona and the Canary Islands. And so there is really a big impact. That's that high demand that we see that's concentrated on very specific sites with people who have very little time. And the real trend here, I think, is the emerging trend here is that people are going off the beaten path and going, you know, traveling a little bit farther than people normally would to get to experiences that very few people actually see. And then they're putting it on YouTube, they're putting it on Instagram.
Yeah.
So we see an awful lot of that trend going on today.
Okay, let's have some more tips, though, for being a good tourist out there. I mean, it goes beyond take only pictures, leave only footprints.
Right. Well, the first thing to remember is you're in a foreign country. This is not your country. And people have customs and cultures, and you ought to respect that to begin with and know a little bit about the language if it's a foreign language country that you're going to, and a little bit more about the customs of what is acceptable and not acceptable. And I think a lot of tourists don't really care about that, and it's a shame that they don't. So those are like the 2 prime things to consider when you're visiting a foreign country.
Yeah.
And, you know, to talk about, you mentioned before spending, one of the trends that we're seeing is that we see more people traveling, which is, you know, boosting the revenues of food and beverage and retail outlets in airports and also at the destinations. But if we look at the individuals, their levels of spending are actually dropped a little bit. So I think that's sort of a portent of what's going to happen in the future. But even though we see this large number of people traveling and everybody's making money, the individual traveler is trying to be more frugal and spend their money a little bit more wisely. Certainly here in this hemisphere, with the inflationary period that we're going through, that's a real trend that individuals are trying to conserve their money and get the best value for their dollar.